Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we have a very interesting discussion lined up on the post-election dynamics in Pakistan. So, I am joined by Uday and Raga for our discussion here, and I'd like to ask for their inputs on the very interesting developments that have happened over the past few days. Uh, the February 8th elections in Pakistan actually delivered an unexpected outcome. Despite initial predictions favoring the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, led by jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan, made significant gains. This was particularly through its supported independent candidates. So the post-election dynamics in Pakistan reflect a significant shift in the political power. The results have defied the expectations that we previously had and led to various uncertainties about the future of the government. However, there's also challenges for the PTI as the party faces restrictions due to the electoral symbol issues, and this has prompted talks of a coalition government between the PMLN and the Pakistan People's Party. So in this in this political environment in Pakistan, which reflects a broader rejection of the political establishment as well as the military influence in Pakistani politics, I would like to ask for your insights, Uday and Raga, on the electoral process and the latest developments that have taken place in the country.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mitma. So I'll start off with, what you mentioned, the shifting political dynamics that this election has showed. Uh, so this election comes after around 2 years of the military and the establishment, the government, attempting to curb Imran Khan's party and its influence. As you said, they pretty much put him in jail for a lot of cases. Um, and he has long sentences, and the party was basically uh broken up to a degree, but they still managed to get such a significant vote share in the elections before the official results came out, and that showed it to be a different case. The elections were not free and fair, and this has been echoed by countries over across the world, including allies of Pakistan. Um, so the shifting political dynamics is quite interesting because the military has been the one stable bastion, I guess, in Pakistan and its politics since independence, as in they've always been in power, whether outrightly or in the back. But these election results really show that, the electorate of Pakistan may be turning away from the establishment um, that they've backed for so long. And this is rather notable. It was notable on the 9th of May when people actually attacked the military establishment in places last year when Imran Khan was arrested, and because that hasn't been seen in Pakistan. The military are, quite prominent and above criticism, except from, liberal circles. But now we're seeing that criticism widen to more of Pakistan's public and electorate. So this will be a dynamic that has to be watched out. We have to keep an eye out for in the future. That's not to say, the military will go away overnight, and that this is the end. But this is definitely a major marker of the changing dynamics in Pakistan, given the political and economic instability over the last few years, the security stability too. Now, just before I ask Raga to expand a bit on, the economic factors, just mentioning, Mitma, what you were talking about, the coalition between the PPP and the PMLN that may form and be the next government. The PPP and PMLN were also in power before the caretaker government, and we saw that when they were united against the different when they were united against Imran Khan, they worked together well. But as soon as the establishment pushed Imran Khan away, these groups started fighting. And there's a lot of infighting between them. On paper, they'll be in a coalition government, but in reality, they will be vying for power themselves to increase their own influence. So it's going to be a shaky coalition government, whichever one comes to place, which doesn't bode well for Pakistan in an economic, from an economic or security standpoint. Raga, maybe you want to come onto the economic issues, but before that, Mithma, maybe you could just give us a rundown of the current numbers of the National Assembly.
Yes, so like you said, there was a lot of efforts by the military and the courts to sideline Imran Khan and the PTI party. Despite all of these efforts, independent candidates backed by the PTI actually emerged victorious in the National Assembly polls. They managed to capture 93 of the 266 seats, and notably, the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, or the PMLN, only won 75 seats, while the Pakistan People's Party secured 53 seats. Just to give a small rundown of the National Assembly and the electoral process, the National Assembly comprises of 336 seats, and parties vie for 264 seats with an additional reserved seats with an additional 70 reserved seats, which are allocated for women and non-Muslims. So because of this, I think Pakistan has actually seen how the whole entire electoral process has been marred by various allegations of vote tampering and other irregularities. And I think that is what is stemming to the escalating tensions among the political factions that you mentioned earlier. So defeated candidates from various parties have also sought vote recounts. They have cited discrepancies and malpractices during the polling. During the polling. So there have been several cases that have been dismissed by the Lahore High Court. They have actually deemed these petitions inadmissible, and similar instances were recorded in Karachi and Peshawar as well. So, Raga, would you like to give a rundown of how the electoral process has actually been affected by the various economic and security challenges that are impacting Pakistan at the moment?
Yes, Mitma. So, amid all of this post-election turmoil, talks are underway to form that coalition government. And this particularly affects the outlook for business because it remains highly uncertain amid the political upheaval that we're seeing right now with a hung parliament. And we're also seeing a revival of terror threats that were subdued for a very long time in Pakistan. And this has led to the dampening of the business environment. Currently, the absence of clear policy agendas from major parties, coupled with the ongoing allegations of election irregularities, has deterred investor confidence, and it will potentially stall economic reforms as well. And a lot of stakeholders will be closely monitoring the formation of this coalition government. Moving forward, the country needs to address its pressing economic challenges, which include inflation, unemployment, and fiscal deficit. And part of these economic challenges really stem from the global upheaval that was triggered by the COVID pandemic. We also had the disruptions in global supply chains, and we also had geopolitical tensions, such as the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, overall impacting Pakistan. These have plunged the nation into economic disarray because there is dwindling purchasing power, there is depleted foreign exchange reserves, and an escalation of civil unrest as well. And the extreme decline in Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves, which plummeted to a historic low of about $3.1 billion in early 2023, poses a significant challenge. This is compounded by the daunting task of paying a projected debt of $73 billion by 2025, and further complicated by the dramatic devaluation of the Pakistani rupee. Pakistan's external debt dynamics are quite complex because it has historic ties with China and Saudi Arabia, and a lot of countries in the Middle East. The economic complexity of CPEC, which is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and coupled with China's reluctance to restructure debt payments, has strained negotiations with international financial institutions like the IMF. And reviving relations with Pakistan will be a top priority for the government that comes in. While Islamabad and Beijing maintain that status as all-weather allies officially, this relationship has somewhat cooled down due to the concerns surrounding CPEC. When I say concerns, I mean security issues and challenges. And China itself, the Chinese government has maintained a more cautious approach to outbound investment in recent years, which has contributed to this overall cooling of relations, especially considering that a significant portion of Pakistan's external debt is owed to China. And nevertheless, the incoming government will aim to renew this relationship and seek financial support to avoid defaulting on its foreign debt obligations. Both China and Pakistan view their partnership as a pretty strategic one against a common rival that they have, which is in India. So I see this particular economic outlook, especially with their foreign ties and intertwined with their infrastructure project investments and further, foreign interest continuing with a new government. And as the new government takes office, it does face all of these challenges, right? It faces expenditure reduction, it faces deficit management, and urgent comprehensive plans like expanded tax nets and a lot of investments are crucial for recovery and sustained growth. Yeah, so
Right.
these are some of the challenges I can foresee.
Right. So the incoming government, just to bounce off you, Raga, the incoming government also faces a myriad of security threats, and the most, the highest, or the most concerning out of these is the increase in terrorism in Pakistan since the Afghan Taliban took over in 2021. We have seen a marked rise in terrorism in Pakistan. It started off in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but it has been spreading to other cities where the Pakistani Taliban have been kind of rebuilding their old networks and conducting attacks. The Pakistani Taliban has also expanded. It's now trying to work with some groups in Balochistan, which I will touch upon separately in a minute. But there are multiple terrorist groups active in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and the security environment, well, the security forces cannot control the environment. In the run-up to the elections, we saw that there were significant threats of, suicide attacks, bombings, and other terrorist activities in many cities, not only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, but also other places in Pakistan. So this trend line is just going to continue as, Pakistan doesn't know how to deal with the Afghan Taliban. And they can't influence the Afghan Taliban as much as they thought they could. So we'll have to see how that goes. And just touching upon, China and Balochistan, yeah, China has been a bit more hesitant to implement or, to push forward its projects because of the security threats towards the China-Pakistan economic corridor. The insurgency in Balochistan over the last few years has just been intensifying. There are now multiple Baloch groups. They've conducted, suicide attacks, large-scale attacks in cities like Karachi. They hit the Karachi Stock Exchange. They've targeted Chinese interests. So, the security environment in Balochistan is already very volatile, and the security forces who are more distracted with maintaining, or who are more distracted with political developments as they have been over the last 2 years. This has created, a kind of gap that terrorists have and can continue to exploit. So in terms of security and terrorism specifically, the risk in Pakistan is just going to get higher moving ahead. Yeah.
That's a very interesting point there. So I believe we spoke about the security element and the increasing tensions in the political sphere, and as well as the economics of the country. So I'd just like to bounce some ideas off of you as to the various scenarios that will emerge for Pakistan going forward in relation to government formation. So uh, what do you think could be several scenarios that could come up in the coming days? So they
Right. Well, firstly, this is all dependent on, whether the government manages to form. Say we get a coalition government with the Pakistan People's Party and the PMLN. Then the scenarios will be basically looking at the stability of this coalition in the short term, medium term, and long term. In the long term, this coalition will be unstable. It might work together for the short and medium term as because the establishment and everyone is trying to focus on getting the economy back on track, managing security, and moving past the elections and having a government in place. But the long-term outlook is not as rosy. Um, Another scenario which is unlikely, but which would offer more stability is if there is a coalition government that is formed between the PTI, the PPP, the PMLN, with all the independents. Now, this is more unlikely because of the high degree of tensions between different candidates and the parties themselves. But this would also be a more inclusive government, and it would give uh, less accusations that, one side was being favored over the other, and it may phase down tensions more and help a sort of reconciliation if these guys decided to work together. But again, this is a very unlikely scenario at this point. Um, I think those are the two main scenarios, Mitma. It really just depends on, at the moment, how things play and how the government forms. It's really dependent on that and, the politicking that will take place over the next few weeks as a government comes to power. Um, with that, Mitma, Raga, any closing points from you guys on Pakistan and what's coming next, before we end this discussion?
nothing on my end, do they?
So they're basically looking at the overall challenges that we spoke about and the possible coalition between a PMLN and a PPP. It does look like, and Pakistan has had a history of this, that a prime minister does not usually complete the term. It does seem that weak coalition is coming in, and especially favored by the military establishment. And the fate of Imran Khan is hanging by a thread, but it is his best case scenario with in terms of the political outcome at the very least. So it remains to be seen what happens going forward.
Yeah, definitely. And how things are now will be very different from how they are, 1 or 2 years from now when the parties and elites have different interests or priorities. So it's gonna be a volatile few years for Pakistan. It has been since for the last few years, but this is one country that needs either a complete turnaround or it's just going to keep going down this deterioration, which does not bode well for the whole region because
I
an
do have a
unstable
question here.
Pakistan, yep,
Yeah. So remember the post the American invasion of Afghanistan, and during
yep,
the entire time that they were there, and there was a lot of uh, sleeper cells being trained to sort of conduct terror attacks, and that was the point where Pakistan was extremely unstable. Do you foresee a return of that level of insecurity in the Pakistan environment?
that's a good question. So you're referring to the late 2010s, late 2000s
Yes.
especially,
Yes.
when every year thousands of people were being killed in terror attacks, and security forces were also raiding terrorists and vice versa. At this point, I wouldn't, want to be alarmist and say that it's going to get to that point. Uh, Pakistani security forces, they are, experienced, but the problem is that they have limited resources. They have limited resources to a degree, and the main problem is the resolve of actually, trying to counter terrorism, which isn't necessarily there when you're busy maintaining security for political reasons and you're more focused on that. The second thing is, and this is the factor that could, lead to a resurgence like we saw in the 2010, is Pakistan's relation with the Afghan Taliban. This relationship has been worsening, and the Afghan Taliban, they're not a benign and friendly actor. And we already see that, the Pakistani Taliban is essentially operating in from Afghanistan and conducting attacks in Pakistan and expanding its presence there. So while I wouldn't say we're at the point where, we're seeing what we saw more than a decade ago, uh, but if Pakistan keeps going down this path, like that cannot be, completely written out, if that answers your question, Raga.
Yes, it does.
All right, so with that, thanks a lot for everyone listening, and thanks Mitma for hosting this, and Raga for joining us with the inputs. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you later this week on another discussion.